Welcome to the podcast series Talking Against Stalking, where I talk about my experiences of stalking and other crimes that fall under violence against women and girls. I'll interview other victims to hear their stories and interview professionals to understand the perspectives coming from different sectors in the UK. I'm your host, Joey, and today I'll be talking to an amazing woman, Alessia. She is an accomplished family support worker. She has worked and supported many victims of domestic abuse, and she herself has been a victim of domestic abuse and stalking. Alessia is now a recovery coach for domestic abuse survivors. She has her own amazing podcast and social media pages under the name Dea Coaching. But first of all, if you do not know what stalking is a crime in which one person becomes fixated or obsessed with another and performs unwanted and repeated behaviours in which causes the victim to feel distressed, scared and harassed. This can lead to serious mental health difficulties, disruption to lives, and in some cases death. So, Alessia, thank you for coming on my podcast today. Can you tell us, in as much or little detail as you're comfortable with, your experience of being a stalking victim?
Yeah. Okay. So when I was 19, so that's nearly 20 years ago. That's quite crazy. I was in an abusive relationship with somebody, and that person apparently had been abusive to previous victims, but nobody ever spoke about it because the community were quite scared of him. So I was just like naive, happy-go-lucky girl, got together with him, and straight away there were loads of red flags, but I just didn't know what they were. It wasn't obvious to me that was abusive. It just felt uncomfortable. So I was with him for 7 months, and I went away to Italy, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what freedom's like. And I actually had my phone with me because he'd take that off me, things like that. And then I was determined to go back here and end it with him. And that was like, my little way of trying to get my strength up to do it. So came back to England, I did it. And then I was relieved thinking, oh my God, thank God that's over with. But actually that was the beginning of a nightmare. So for nearly 4 years, he stalked me. So there are lots of different things that he would do. So he would hire different cars or borrow friends or family cars and just be on my parents. So I lived with my parents at the time. He would just park randomly. So the road was like, it's an avenue, so it had different trees and stuff all up the road. And it was a straight road. So you couldn't see all the way up to the top, all the way to the bottom. We were like in the middle. So he would just park randomly. So I never knew where he was because it was a different car. So he went to those kind of lengths. He would then text me, 50, 60 times a day, constantly ring me. And the texts were like, I know what you're wearing today. I can see you. You're doing this. Your mum's looking like this. Your dad's doing that. Your brother's just left. So it was really scary. And then I kept a lot of it to myself because I didn't understand it. And back then, domestic abuse wasn't spoken about, and stalking wasn't even something that I don't think people even knew. Like, it wasn't even a crime. So it was a really strange time for me, and a lot for me to try to process. And I very much lived in fear. So I then finally told my mum, and we just all were in this bubble of constant fear. So he would do things as well, like he would follow me to work. So in the end, I was taken to work, and I worked at school at the time. And so they had to let all the parents know that if you see this vehicle, you see this man. And it just still didn't feel like it was my life. It felt like I was in someone else's world. It was so strange. Then things ramped up. So I think, because it's all a bit of a blur, some of it's like, none of it's like in the right order, if that makes sense.
I have that too.
Yeah. So I think this is what made us call the police, was he was sending me riddles of how he was going to kill me. And then he would say things like, the sun's going to go dark in your world because I'm going to do this and this and this. And it all just kept coming and coming and coming. So then my mum was like, I think we need to call the police. And the reason we didn't before that is because at that day and age, you only called the police if it was really urgent. And we weren't sure what this was or and I
There
think,
wasn't like 101 or something, was
yeah,
it? There
no,
wasn't.
nothing like that. Yeah,
No, it was like you would ring 999 if there was an emergency, and other than that, it was all very confusing about what
yeah,
you would go to them
yeah,
about. Yeah. No.
absolutely. It was like complete urgency, life or death. And I guess when you're in what you're in that bubble we were in, we were just like trying to survive each day and hoping it was just going to stop, and didn't really want to hassle anyone with it. And we didn't speak to anyone else about it either. It was just our family that knew about it. But the school did only at that time when he started to follow me to work. So yeah, so then we called the police, and I remember him coming over, this police officer. Oh my gosh, he was so arrogant. He was like, "My army's bigger than his," and he was just laughing when he was reading the text, literally laughing, going, "Yeah, right." And I was just like, "What?" And I then felt like I was hassled to the police in that moment. My mum just couldn't believe the way they were. He was like, "Don't worry, I'll go and speak to him. He'll never hassle you again." So they left, and we didn't hear anything else. We kept chasing them, going, "Look, he's still doing it. Like, we haven't heard whether he got warned or not, like, what's going on." Didn't hear anything back for months. The stalking continued. And then what he then did was he then sent, now, in my head, it was a funeral wreath. My mum was like, "Oh, I thought it was dead roses in a circle." So we're not quite sure anymore. But anyway, it was dead flowers. And he left it on my car, and it was in a circle. And there was a picture of me in the middle, and it said RIP. So that literally, I was like, "Oh my God, he's like going up a notch now. This is getting," I felt terrified. And I honestly thought there was going to be a point he was going to kill me. I can't remember what year this was. I think this was the third year of him stalking me. Now, there was like 2 or 3 weeks break, and it felt finally my life was going to get back together again. It was going to be all right. I got into my car and I was like, "Right, I'm going to go and see a friend. This is going to be okay. I haven't heard from him for ages." I scanned the road. So did my mum. We were like, "No, everything's all right." And my mum was very much trying to encourage me to get my life back, and get back out and get back in my car and drive and do all the things. I remember I got into the car. It was dark. Yeah, we scanned the road. No, nothing unusual. It looked like all the cars our neighbours had. It was fine. Got in the car, and I remember putting on music to try and distract my mind, and just kept talking to myself like it's going to be fine. I remember as I was just about to turn out, this car just literally sped past me. Now, it was a family car and it had baby on board. So I didn't think anything of it. Went behind this car, and I was like, "Yes, I'm doing it. It's fine. There's no car behind me. Yes, he's not following me. It's all good." I remember getting to the bottom of the road, and this was the moment where I was like, "Yeah, he's got me now." So it was like a movie, all like slow mo almost, but the interior light in the car ahead went on, and all I saw in the mirror were his eyes. And literally, my world just went boom, and I went into like a freeze response. And I just thought in my head, "This is the night he's going to kill me." I can't remember much. I just remember holding onto the steering wheel. He got out. A car came up behind me, and he told it to go around, so it did. And now people will say to me, "Why did you do what you did next?" But you just cannot explain the fear that you're in. So you will do certain things and react in certain ways because you've just gone into this trigger response to try and survive, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's the friend response, isn't it? A lot of the time, it's
Yeah.
the fall of the friend, whatever you call it, and
Yeah.
you just in your head, you're just going along with anything, to thinking. But it's also, I think, a lot of the times with stalking, when it's comes from domestic abuse, and you know the person, you've been in a relationship with them, and you kind of know how their brain works,
Yeah.
also. So you as yourself would have this thing of, okay, like if I just go along with it, maybe he'll think, oh, we're getting back together. Maybe he'll like not take it further,
Yeah.
and it's your way of, and that is a very valid response, and it is a response that unfortunately a lot of police officers don't understand, and general society, to be
Yeah.
honest. And it's something that I try and teach people about, because it is actually it's something, what was that show that I watched? Oh, hashtag text me when you get home.
Oh, yeah. I
And
watched that. Yeah.
there was a girl that got kidnapped, and one of the police officers after said she basically wrote the handbook on how to survive being kidnapped, but she didn't know that's what she was doing. It was her natural response to fear was
Yeah.
friend, and she went along with it and pretended, and the police officer literally said, oh yeah, she wrote the handbook on it and understood that that was a response and a way to survive. But
Exactly.
unfortunately, a lot of people don't get that, do they?
No, they
Which
don't. I got so much judgment for it. So he knocked on the window, and back then we didn't have electric. It was all the wheelie down thing. So I wheeled my window down, and then he was like, "I'm gonna get back in my car, and you're gonna follow me." And I was like, "Okay," literally just like, "Okay." So he got in his car. I followed him, and then he turned. He then went onto the side of the road, parked up, and I went behind him. Again, I know I did it, but it's because I was just so scared that if I didn't, the way that he would work is he would then ramp up 0 to 100 and it would have been a lot worse. I did that. And then he got out of his car and he did this. So I did it, got out of my car, went round. And I was stood at the side of his car and he'd opened the door and he was like, come on, get in, get in. And I was just like, okay, got in the car. And I left the door open though. And it was quite, it's a main road. So there were people still driving past and everything. And he said to me, like, oh, I'm doing amazing. I've got this new job. He was just trying to get me back, basically. And then I remember saying to him, I need to go. I don't know, there was something in me that just thought, oh my God, what am I doing? And I was like, I need to go. And as I tried to get out, he held onto my arm, and my right arm, which he knew, I broke when I was 7 and I have so many issues with it. So it's very delicate. So somebody does hold onto it, grip onto it, it hurts. And he knew the area to do it was my elbow because that's where it broke and I had lots of nerve issues. So he did the thing that he used to do when we were in a relationship. He grabbed it and squeezed it, and that really is painful for me. And he just yanked me in, and then he was saying stuff in my ear, I don't even know what. And I just remember this old man on a bike coming down and he went, are you okay, dear? And obviously he doesn't want to show that he's being a certain way. So he let go of my elbow and that man just kind of shook me out of it. And I got out, got in my car and I just went. I don't even know if he followed me. I haven't got a clue, but I just remember that happening. And that was terrifying. And then what else did he do? There were so many things he did, just appearing at places. And I was thinking, how do you even know that I'm here? And things would slow down when he had another girlfriend. That's what I recognized. And a lot of people, I kept changing my phone and I kept changing my phone number, and I was only sharing it with people who were really close to me. I later found out that he was intimidating one of my friends, and so they would always give him my new number. So I was never like free almost because I didn't know how he was getting it, who was giving it to him, because they were real close friends of mine.
yeah.
And then one of the big things that he did after that was when I turned 21, I hadn't heard from him again. I think this was the longest period of time, 2 months, I think. And all my friends are like, oh my God, you're going to be 21. Come on, we've got to do something. I was like, oh, I don't know. They're like, yes, come on, we're going to get you out. And I was like, oh, okay. That we were at my parents' house. I was in the front room. I had a phone call and it was a private number. And I thought, okay, because I was in my bubble of being, birthday girl, I answered it, whereas I normally wouldn't have. And it was him singing happy birthday down the phone. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be sick. My friend took the phone off me and she just literally was like, that's it. And she had a massive go at him. Got off the phone. She went, you're still coming out. You're not going to let him stop you. Now, he wouldn't have known where we were going or anything. So I don't know if he was watching the house and therefore followed us and we just didn't know that. I'm not sure. But we went to a restaurant and everyone was just so lovely. So I enjoyed myself. And then we went into town and we went to this bar. It's like a club bar thing. We went there and my friends told the bouncers the situations that they could keep an eye on me. And I remember I was on the dance floor with my friends having a really good time. I was like, oh my God, finally, like I feel like happier and everything's going to be okay. And then next thing I know, the bouncers were coming close to me. My friends started crying and I was like, oh, but they were all trying to crowd me so I didn't see anything. The music stopped. People were screaming. And I looked ahead and I could see it was him. And he was throwing bar stools around and he then was stamping one of the bouncers' heads. So loads of the bouncers were then dragging him out. The police came. And then I remember the bouncers escorting me out of the building. And there were loads of police officers surrounding him. And he was in the middle, like like panting and making noises and circling round and round, almost like an animal that lost control, basically. And then I had to go home. I then found out that he never got arrested or nothing for it because though he had been sectioned, which I didn't know about. He was sectioned before I was with him for trying to gas his family. No one
Mm.
ever told me that. Claire's Law didn't exist then either, so there's not like I knew anything about that. So that was kind of like what happened. In the end, it finished, and that's because he got with someone new, and unfortunately, he was abusive to her as well. I later found out because then me and her connected many years later. But yeah, it
Mm.
completely changed my life completely. And so from that, I started to self harm, and then I got complex PTSD. But I didn't have much support at all for any of it. The police never helped me after that. So I was very much kind of left on my own to just kind of figure life out and figure
Yeah.
how to heal and recover from it. So yeah, it was a journey. It was awful.
I mean, my friends literally watched stuff happen and would see my perpetrator following me everywhere. Like I did not leave the house for a good year without him being there. Like I was never alone, and it was just so normalized.
Yeah.
Like everybody just was just like, this, there's Joe, there's
Yeah.
Joe with us talking behind her. Like it was so normal. Like everybody just treated it as the new normal, and then that was just it. Like it was really odd when I look back at it. I think that's why for a long time I didn't even talk about it for ages. I didn't talk about it to anyone, and I didn't describe it as what it was really. And I kind of even look back at that and think, why did I describe it as that? Like it was just like, oh, crazy ex-boyfriend, or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
psycho ex or whatever. And
That's what I
but
call
like,
my ex, psycho
yeah,
ex.
I just,
Yeah.
and it frustrates me now, when I look back on it and I think like I would describe him as my ex for such a long time.
Mm.
Really, I look back at it and think that wasn't a relationship. Like we weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. I described him as my ex for such a long time. And like I felt so empowered the moment I stopped calling him my ex and started calling him a perpetrator. Like that was really empowering for me with that moment where it switched and I like suddenly realized like, oh, no, like that wasn't a relationship, that wasn't a consensual relationship. um but no, it's definitely normalized. I don't know if you experienced that with a lot of your family and friends. Like I know
Yeah.
you said mum was really supportive and understanding and stuff, and I think it's hard also for parents to find the line, isn't it? Because they want to be like, I want to take you seriously, and I do take you seriously, but they don't want to like make your fear 10 times worse. So I
Yeah.
can see where the line can get a bit iffy with
Absolutely.
parents.
Yeah, and we
But
barely spoke about it as well as a family. It just wasn't spoken about either, which I
yeah, yeah,
think, and I don't, and I understand that it was so hard for them. But looking back, I think I probably needed people to talk about it, and
yeah,
I didn't know people outside of that circle knew about it. It was only when we went out for my 21st, I told one of my friends, and then she then told the other people because none of them knew about it. And like you say, you just kind of you just keep it inside and you just think, well, this is just my life now. It's just, yeah.
yeah.
And like you say, when people then started knowing about it, they were like, oh, yeah, he's just a crazy psycho. That's all it is. And like
Yeah.
almost downplaying it. And you
All
think,
it is as if like people can't die from crazy psychos. It's
yeah,
like something I've been thinking about lately is my own near-death experiences. And I wondered if you could tell me more about any more that you're aware of. I know you mentioned the first one, but were there any more that you remember? I know that you have memory issues, kind of like me, but I think yours are very different to mine. I seem to remember every single incident, whereas you have a lot of memory gaps with incidents, don't you?
yeah,
I don't know if you would feel comfortable talking about that at
yeah,
all.
that's fine. So I know something happened in a petrol station, but I don't know what. But whenever I have to go and fill my car up, I become triggered like quite badly. And I even remember the son in his car and him, it's disgusting, but him, because he used to do this, having his shirt unbuttoned, thinking he was really cool. So he'd do that. And I remember him just being angry, but I don't know anything else. That's all I know. So it's just something I need to work through. But that's something of a memory that's a little bit all over the place. But one thing I do have that's really vivid for me, and I think this is one of the most traumatic times within the relationship. I went out, and I remember I was dressed up, went to his car, and he just went, "Oh yeah, here she goes, looking like a slag." And I was like, "Oh, okay, hello." Got in the car, drove there, and he said, "You're not allowed to go and see your friends because it's my friend's birthday. You're not allowed to go and see her until I tell you." And I was like, "Okay." And people now go, "But why did you just do that? Why did you not just walk away?" And it's like I was almost like a robot. I was just like, "Yeah, okay, yeah." So I remember sat there and he was there with his best friend. They both got absolutely hammered. And I just sat there drinking water because he didn't get me a drink or anything. He then said, "Right, we'll go and see your friends now." Went off to this place in town, and he had been drinking, and then he insisted he was going to drive me home. And I was like, "No, no, you've been drinking." He was like, "No, you're getting in my car." Got in his car. Instead of taking me home, he took me to, so he was living with his mum and stepdad. He took me there. And then he said to me, "Right, you're going to stay in the car and I'm going to go in the house. When I text you to come in, you're going to come in." So I did. So I stayed in the car. He went there. He texted me, so then I went towards the house. The front door he'd left open, and the whole house was pitch black. His mum and stepdad were asleep upstairs. Now, I'm sure they would have heard all this, but I think they very much turned a cheek to him because I think they were scared of him as well. So I went in the house, and you go in and you go straight into the living room. So I did that. Next thing I know, he's whispering stuff, and but I couldn't see where he was. So just all these whispers, and I was like, "What?" And then he was throwing things at me. So I just remember running through to the kitchen, and I went left, and there's their downstairs toilets. I went in there, locked myself in there, and it was like a fuzzled like window, but I could just see the moon. So I just kept focusing on the moon, going, "It's okay, you're not going to die. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right." And then it went really, really quiet, and it was quiet for quite a while. So I really slowly opened the door, and I went back round, and I just legged it out of the house. And then I just remember running, running, and running. And it was God knows what time in the morning, just running. I took my shoes off and just ran and ran. And then he came up beside me in his car really, really slowly and went, "Hello, teddy bear." Literally like Jekyll and Hyde. That's what he was like. He was like, "Come in. Why did you run away? I was just playing a game." And I was just like, "What?" So confused. And I just carried on running. So he just carried on curb crawling, basically. And then in the end, I got in and he took me home. But that incident, I think, was the point where things for me really changed in the relationship. Like that's when I was terrified. So that's the kind of character he was. Very Jekyll and Hyde. One minute it was this, one minute it was that.
Did you truly feel in the moment that you could die,
Yeah.
or is that something that you feel when you look back on it?
In the moment I felt it. I felt it often with him. When I
Yeah.
look back, I think, God, I think I felt it quite a lot. That if I didn't
Mm.
do as he said, then he would do something to me. And I found out when I was in the relationship that his ex-girlfriend before, he threw her down the stairs and she got knocked unconscious because she said no. So I think
Mhm.
instead of that making me then end it with him, that made me fear him even more, knowing that there was more he could do to me. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was just like a constant trigger response all the time, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all the time with him.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, that's definitely something as well as a lot of people about fear responses think like it's kind of a choice sometimes. And it's like,
No.
no, I mean, I've been in so many different scenarios and it was always different, like
Yeah.
always a different response. And you just don't really, um, you don't know what's going to come. So you also don't know like how to protect yourself because a lot of, I mean, I know obviously there's like Marines and stuff that train, but like us little, we're not in Marine training, unfortunately. It's kind of it's difficult for me to listen to because I feel a bit weird about it because I didn't really think that I was going to die like when I was in it, and I think that's just because everything that happened to me just was not taken seriously at all. Like
Yeah.
even though I had a lot of police involvement, recently I've started getting some of my information back and stuff because I have memory gaps like you, and I couldn't remember exactly why I didn't feel like I was taken seriously. Like I remembered a few things, but and one of the things that I looked through was a risk assessment that was taken. And I've got a few police statements that were taken around the same time. It was like a few weeks before I had a statement took, and then they did a risk assessment on me. And when I look down it, and it's like question after question after question, obviously, and it's all about, it was saying like, do you feel safe? No, like all of these different things. And obviously they were aware of everything that had happened, and they were aware of the recent things that had happened, and they still deemed it as medium risk level. And what they'd written at the end, specifically the reason why they put would be high risk, except she has very responsible pro police parents. And I was like, what the hell does that have to do? You know, you just think like,
Exactly.
oh, okay, so my parents are pro police. That means I'm safe because they're pro.
Oh, it means you're
I
great.
was just like, okay, you know, you look back at it and you just think like, but I also, obviously, I was so young, like, so I'm not going to sit there and argue with a police officer or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not even sure that I remember. I don't really remember this, but I'm not sure they would have even told me. They probably would have just sent me the risk assessment after. Like, they just.
Yeah. So I've done those risk assessments for families I used to work with, and I never liked
Mm,
them because you have to score so high for it to be high
yeah,
risk. And I think as well with that risk assessment, it's so aimed at physical
yeah,
and
yeah.
sexual. But if those two things aren't happening with a stalker, it doesn't mean you're not high risk,
No.
and that's where I just think there's such a big gap with it. And
What do you fear the suspect might do?
yeah,
And I literally thought that it'll hurt me or whatever.
mm,
And then it says, but it does, I think that to me feels a bit irrelevant because I go, well, what I fear someone might do to me is very different than what they actually might do
yeah,
to me.
absolutely.
Especially when, and I feel like that's kind of a bit irrelevant. Like, I feel like asking someone their feelings about it and stuff. But like to say, what do you fear they're going to do to you? And it's like, well, at the time, I was like in this delusional mindset of like, well, you know, he's not going to kill me, he wouldn't hurt me because I was in love with him.
Yeah.
Like I still loved him, and I was like in my head, even though I was going and I was saying he's doing this and he's doing that and he's hurting me and he's obviously not leaving me alone, I still didn't think in my head that he would have actually done anything. Like even though he did physically hurt me, but it wasn't all the time, and I guess because nobody actually saw it, bar like a couple of instances. I think he was still gaslighting
Yeah.
me way after we broke up because I still was like, oh no, like because no one else saw it,
Yeah.
it almost
And
felt
it's
like it
that
wasn't
trauma
real.
bond, isn't it? You were trauma bonded to him. So when you're in that, it's hard for you to see the worst in that person because your brain is trying to go, no, everything's okay as a way to convince you are safe. But actually,
Yeah,
reality isn't that. But when you're trauma bonded, that's what will naturally happen.
yeah, exactly. And I think because I was sexually abused by him,
Yeah.
but again at the time didn't know that I'd been sexually abused, like it kind of, it's like he convinced me that this like misogynistic view on sex basically, and I was like, you know, when he did it, it was like, well, you know, he can't help himself. Like,
Mhm.
he'd even kind of convinced me. It's like, oh, you're so sexy and you're so this and so that, that like I physically can't, like, I don't have control. Like, I can't stop myself and all this kind of
Well,
stuff. And like,
basically.
yeah,
Mhm.
like convinced me that I was like so
Yeah.
irresistible that like it was normal for people to like respond like that to me, which was like obviously ridiculous, but I'd still like, I still had that mindset and I still thought it, and I thought it for a really long time, and like it really affected like my sort of sexual encounters with everyone. Like it felt like the only normal way to have sex is for me to resist slightly
Yeah.
and then like give in. That's what felt normal to me. And that's how I would have sex with
Yeah.
everyone, like carrying on. Like that's what felt normal. And the kind of messed up thing is that the guys would go along with it.
Mhm.
Like they thought, and like that's kind of like even messed up when I think about
Yeah.
it. Like they would still be like, oh no, she's just like teasing. And it's like, even though that's kind of what I was doing almost, but that's just because he'd convinced me that that was like what was normal, like that's how
Yeah.
like people have sex, and like it was really odd to me. But then I still thought that the worst thing he was going to do to me was that, basically, like that's kind of what I thought his intentions were. And the instance that I like, obviously there must have been more instances, but like I can't say for sure because I'm not sure, obviously, of what his intentions were. I can't specifically say, but there's one instance that I look back on that I know in my head, I know now, like what he was going to
Mm.
do. But Obviously I'll never be able to prove it, but and it was he'd, which is very classic, and it's very classic actually when you look at femicides and domestic violence relationships, and it's really textbook. Like when I read some of the like common factors and stuff, and I was like, oh my god, like that's exactly what he did, and literally like blackmailed me, was saying that he had pictures of me and stuff, like intimate pictures, and that he was going to get someone to post them all around my school. And obviously I was
Yeah.
mortified because he'd already smear campaigned and everybody thought the worst of me. So I was just like, no, I can't have this happen as well. Like I would rather do anything than have this happen. So was saying like, you need to come to my mum's house, or like I just want to get some closure, because this was after we'd broken up and he'd already been stalking me for a while. The police were already involved, and everybody knew, kind of, like all my friends knew what was going on. But I didn't tell anyone. I was like, I cannot tell anyone because nobody can know about these pictures,
Yeah.
um, because I had sent them to him when we were together. And so obviously I went, I was like, in my head, I still, even though he had, like I said, he had physically hurt me, he had sexually abused me, but I was like, just in my head was like, well, he loves me so much, like he's not going to hurt me. Like, I guess I didn't really even think about murder and things. I lived in a very like good household, like a very safe household.
Mhm.
Like I hadn't really like seen. I wasn't one to like watch the news and like see bad things happening in the world. Like I genuinely was really innocent to the world, and
Mhm.
like didn't know much about the bad things that could happen to people. And like it's not a slate on my parents, but like they never like spoke to me about things. They never
Your
like
parents, yeah. Pink fluffy clouds my mum wanted me to live on. Bless her.
no. And like, to be fair, my parents also grew up in really safe households and nothing bad ever happened to them. Like they
Mhm.
had never experienced any kind of like domestic abuse, violence. Like they'd never seen it really themselves. So like really I don't think they thought that they had anything to tell me, or like that it would have been relevant to me. And so I was just so innocent to the world. So I sort of didn't, I never even fathomed that something like that would have ever happened. And I
Mhm.
just obviously went, I mean, I was blackmailed. I didn't want to go, but I obviously went thinking that I was going to be okay. And it was like whenever we went to his mum's, he'd always open the side gate and we'd always go around the back. And this day was like weird because he opened the front door, and the front door basically, you know, when you have a door and it just goes straight
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
stairs, and then you have a little door there that goes into a living room. And um, he opened the front door, which I obviously thought was a bit strange. And as soon as I sort of like slowed down a bit, got to the front door, and he literally like pulled me in like as soon, and like closed the door as soon as I got in, started pulling me up the stairs, hadn't even said anything to me, like didn't speak a word, but just like pulled me up the stairs, which again was like odd. Like we would only ever go straight upstairs if it was really late and we were going to bed, like when we were
Yeah.
together. So it was again like obviously odd, and my body like started going into a fear response instantly, even though I didn't really know what I was fearing, but I just knew something was off, like
Mhm.
that just gut feeling. And
You feel it, don't you? And you can almost see it in
yeah,
their eyes as well.
it's like this like feeling of
Mm.
coldness. Like I don't know if you know what I mean, but you just feel like cold, like you get this like rush. And I just knew something was up. And then we got to the top of the stairs. And like you said, it was like a movie. And how I remember it now, this is what I say to people a lot is, when I say I don't remember something properly, when I picture it, it's a picture, like it's a snapshot. But you know, when you remember something more vividly, it's like you're watching a
Yeah.
video. And that's how this is to me. A lot of the really bad things, it's like I remember every detail because it's like a slow mo video, like
Mhm.
how you said, it feels like it's in slow motion. And we got to like the landing, and he turned around the banister, and as he turned, whatever the key dropped from, but the front door key dropped, and I saw it fall on the floor, and he still had his hand on my wrist, like pulling me round. And I guess his grip wasn't tight enough because I literally yanked my hand out, grabbed the key at the same time, and full force, like basically tumbled down the stairs. I was running that fast. And then, you know, like when you see in the horror movies, people like
Yeah.
fumbling with keys, and your heart's like on edge because you're like, over the door, over the door. Like that's what it was. Like I managed to literally just get the door open because as I got out the doorway, he was right behind me, running, and it was. he was so close behind me that like literally like his hand was just like not reaching me, and then he sort of stopped and I kept running, and then so he was like a little bit of a distance behind me, and then I almost don't know, I almost think like he stopped on purpose to like intimidate me more
Yeah.
almost, because then he sort of then he went forward and he punched the lamppost like really hard, where it literally like shuddered and like made this, you know, like that
Mm.
noise. Um, Again, like a movie, I like tripped and fell at like just the worst time that you could possibly think to. And it was right in the middle of a road as well. It wasn't a very busy road. It was like a very like little, you know, cul-de-sac kind of place where not many people were. So I tripped and fell, and then he got to me and was kicking me and, you know, like hurting me, obviously like physically assaulting me basically. And then grabbed my legs and started pulling me back. So he was pulling me back to get me back into the house.
Mm.
And even then, in my naive little mind, thought, well, he wanted me in there to sexually assault me. Like that's kind of in my head what I thought he was going to do. But when I think back to really like now, and I think back and I think when I was sexually assaulted, it wasn't like that. Like they were all very,
Yeah.
it was very different. And this felt very desperate.
Mm.
And when I look at the like, you know, things like the femicide timeline and things around like classic femicide cases, and where they would isolate a victim and they would almost convince them in a way to get them on their own and things like that. And I look at it and think now that that was definitely his intent, because he really did try and get me on my own. He somehow had managed to get his mum out of the house, like all these little things that I think. I mean, he sexually assaulted me when his mum was in the house. Like he never needed really to like get anyone out of the house or do any of that kind of thing. Like he didn't care, and I obviously think that his mum must have heard things and just thought like that it wasn't, you know, a non-consensual thing. Um, but I definitely look back on that and think like I was like moments from death, and I don't know what it was that stopped him and what it was that made him let go. And then as I don't know how long I was lying there for. Like I think now that I was unconscious, but I'm not even sure. Like I don't know if I just lay there because I was in such a fear response, or if I was unconscious, because then it goes black and I don't really remember. And then the next thing, I sort of sat up and he wasn't there. Like he'd gone. I don't know if he was in the house or if he'd gone somewhere else. But he, whatever it was, whether someone was in their window or someone walked past or what, like, but something stopped him. I've always wanted to have the answers, but I didn't know if that was something that you sit there and struggle with also, like not really having the answers to
Yeah.
questions about
Absolutely.
literally about life and death and about your own, you know, like why we're here today. Like I'm sure whoever might be listening to this have been in a similar situation, and maybe they might feel like they're going a bit crazy for wanting to know the answers,
Yeah.
and like that's kind of how I felt for a long time.
Or things will trigger me. Like sometimes I'm okay, sometimes I'm not. When there's a program around stalking, it depends where I'm at that time. Depends on whether I can watch it. But if I do and it's ended in death, I literally sit there for days and days after. Like it just keeps hitting me like, oh my God, I'm alive. Like I survived it. Like why? And like you, the incident where I went in the house and then I locked myself in the downstairs toilet, that incident is where I felt like that could have gone a different way. Why was I the one that got away? And then as well, I keep thinking, how come he's not, thank God he hasn't, but killed anyone else? Because to me, he is so capable of that.
Yeah.
So the girlfriend after me, bless her, she was telling me some of the things that he did to her within the relationship. And she said there was one time she was coughing up blood because the beating was so bad. And I just looked at her and I was like, oh my God. And she went, and I survived. And she was the same. She survived. And it's that strange, I don't know, it's like this weird response that the brain goes through, I think, where you recognize how lucky you are, but also there's no, not that you'll ever get closure, but there's no, like, you can't almost finish the chapter because you don't know why, and the why is so important.
Mhm.
But I did like loads from all like the things I've trained in. I can see a lot of why he's behaved the way he has. but it still doesn't make it okay. So there's never any justification for any of the behavior that any of these people
And
do.
you still can't ever prove like their exact thoughts and
No,
feelings in
you
moments.
can't. No.
It's kind of like, when you're watching and you're really, really into like a series, like something
Mhm.
like, I don't know, like I don't know if you watch like Game of Thrones.
Yep, yeah, yep.
Like when you see all the different people's perspectives, and like a lot of the time you're watching it and you're in this thing of like, okay, I'm waiting to find the answer out about this and this and this. And
Yeah,
then right at the end, all of it like it all comes together and
yeah.
you find out the answers to every
And
single
that
like
chapter's closed, you're like, boom, sorted. Yeah.
next one, and then the
Yeah.
next season starts, and then you start with all these unanswered questions and they all
Mm.
get answered, and it's like living in that constant state
Yeah.
of not ever getting to the end, and like
Yeah.
you can't, like, that's kind of the only way I could explain to someone else of the feeling, except it's obviously like your own life, so it's much more like
Mm.
complicated, and it's really hard to explain to people what that feels like, and like
Yeah.
why it bothers me so much. Like it still bothers me, even
Yeah.
though I kind of feel as if people are looking at me and being like, just let it go. Like,
Yes.
why are you like so hyper focused on it? Why are
Yeah.
you so like obsessed with it? And it's like, because it's my life. Like, I
Mm.
want to know why I'm here today, why I'm able to be talking about this, and, like, why am I lucky to be alive? And then you also think, why should I have to say that I'm lucky to be alive? Like,
Yeah. Why is that my reality?
should be lucky to be here. Like, I should just be here.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not, it just doesn't make sense. And I don't know, I wonder like how it's really affected your everyday life. Like, just like I said, like feeling lucky to be alive is not something that a lot of people experience day to day, like have that thought process in their head. And I don't know, has that affected you, or has it affected your friendships even? Like, do you feel like you're not on the same wavelength as some people? Like, do you
Yeah.
take life a lot more seriously or less seriously, or what do you think?
Yeah. I think through healing through it, which may I add, I'd say I'm still trying to do. I think it's just like going to be a constant battle.
Mm.
But for the first few years after the stalking stopped, I felt like I was angry with the world. That's how it felt. And I just felt upset, and I felt like nobody really understood me. And I went through a lot with my mental health. And when I look back, I think, gee, I had a proper breakdown, but I kept going, and I didn't feel like people wanted to listen or wanted to help me. Does that make sense? Like it felt like I was still in this bubble, and it was so strange. But now, all these years later, I look back and I think actually I was let down from the mental health system and the police and the social workers. And I think that's what made me so angry. And the fact that I was so happy go lucky, so naive before the situation. And then when it happened, it changed me. But now, as I'm that much older and I've done so much training in different therapies, I have a clearer understanding on trauma and the impact of stalking and domestic abuse on the brain and the body. So I've done so much work on that. So now I'm more of somebody who wants to have fun. I'm less serious about life, but it's definitely been a journey. Afterwards, for a few years, it was anger and I hate everybody and nobody gets me. And now it's more like love and light, all good. And I'm just kind of embracing life now in more of a positive, happy outlook. But before, absolutely not. I was furious all the time.
Since therapy, I think a lot of people have very mixed feelings about therapy, and a lot of people think like, oh, it makes you hate everyone. But actually, I come out of the experience feeling a lot better about my friends at the time,
Good.
because I did for a long time think like, oh, like why would they do this, or why did they not care, and kind of things like that. And now I look at it and think actually they were just 14-year-old girls like I was.
Yeah,
Like,
you were
they
very
were
young.
they weren't supposed to be the ones who were in charge of my happiness and my safety and my well-being. Like, that wasn't on them, and I came away from it really in a different mindset about that. Not that I ever like blamed everything on them, or but I did just have very like mixed feelings about certain situations where I was like, why did they not do anything or say anything? But I came away of it thinking, okay, but it wasn't their job to say anything or do anything. It was the police's job. It was the school's job. It was all these professionals around me that didn't do anything. I even had I think my mum, it wasn't the police or anything, it was my mum that tried to get like counselling for me, and some woman come and did an assessment on me, and I cried for a good 2 hours with her in my dining room and told her the whole thing, and she wrote it all up on a report and was like, well, we can't really offer any counselling services right now because you clearly have PTSD, but the problem is that you're still going through the trauma, so we can't help you until after the trauma. So it was very much like, I was like, okay, so I'm just going to have to go through it and keep going through it on my own and then get help afterwards. Like, to me, obviously, I just felt extremely neglected and let down. And then to have my perpetrator had mandatory counselling as part of his suspended sentence. And his counsellor came to visit me, and it was a choice. I didn't have to let her come and visit me, but I did. It's a therapist, like obviously I'm not in any danger, and she came to the house and obviously had to get like a background review of what happened to him or whatever. And then she sat there and said, if you need anything, this is my number. Like, if you feel like you could benefit from services and stuff. And a few weeks later, I was really struggling, and I was in a very dark place. Like really, really down in the deep, darkest of places where I could have been. And finally felt like I had someone to reach out to, and text her, and just had like absolutely no response. So I was like,
and the strength for you to do that in the first place would have been huge. And then to be let down like that, you just end up thinking, oh, well, there's no point now, no point in asking for anyone for help.
And I didn't. And I still have it now. I still have this thing where I won't ask for help. Days out and stuff, even like I have to plan the day out. I have to plan it. I've moved area. I moved away from where I think he still lives. I don't know. I don't know anything about him obviously now, but there's still a chance that I could see him anywhere. Sit there and I plan the time and I plan it all, and then I think to myself, right, I mean, I have this every time I leave the house, but specifically with that, I think there is more of a danger because what if we were in there? What if we were walking around and I saw him? Like, what would I do? And so I have this plan almost, like it's like a long listed plan, but it's in my head.
Yeah.
This is what I would do. This is what I would have to do. And I know the one person he's going to go after is me over everyone. So I always think like, I always have these like little backup things, and that's why I have to plan everything. That's really what it is. That's the real reason that it comes down to, is like I have to plan my escape route almost. Like I know, and again, it must sound ridiculous to other people, but like it's kind of difficult for me also, like because I never really got closure. It feels like it never really ended for me because like, he broke suspended sentence so many times and they never did anything about it. And it obviously the only way I could keep safe was I moved away and I went into hiding, like full into hiding. Like nobody knew where I was. I completely cut everybody out from that area. I grew up that area my whole life and had so many friends and close, not even friends that I would see all the time, but you just have so many people on Facebook and stuff that I would always like talk to. And I worked in bars and stuff, so I knew like a lot of people around there, and I completely cut every single person. Didn't speak to anyone, didn't see anyone. I just completely left and got rid of social media, everything. And like I got back in contact with someone from the area that I'd known, and like a few years later, and she didn't really know a lot of what had happened, but she was like, I was literally having a conversation about you like the other week when we got back in contact. She was like, just with some random person, was like, where did she go? Like, she just disappeared. And I was like, yeah, like that's literally what happened. Yeah, I disappeared off the face of the earth because that's what I had to do, and like explain it to her. She was like, oh, like just didn't understand. I was thinking the amount of people that must have just sat there and thought like, I wonder where she went.
Where is she? Yeah.
Who is this person? Like changed my name, like everything, like completely went off the grid. And so it is always kind of unfinished for me because I don't have a clue what his like mindset around it was, like whether he moved on from me or whether it's on pause or whether he might not think about me at all. Like it might be complete, and feel like it's sort of in my head. And so I always think like I could run into him and him not even care. and not have a care in the world. Or he could have been sat there waiting for years and years and years, or have all this built up resentment and want to take it out on me, or I don't know, anything. Like, I could have changed his life in a negative way. Like, he might have lost out on jobs or something because of what happened with us, and have this result. Like, I literally have no idea. It could be any outcome, but because I don't know, I sit there and have to plan everything, and that's how it affects me now. Like, it
More
affects,
unnerving, isn't it?
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
very unnerving, especially as I want to speak out and I want to help people as part of my moral, like, it feels like a moral obligation for me that I want to help people, and I want people to have a different experience to me.
Absolutely.
And so I always sit there and think, well, if he saw it, like, what would his feelings be? And I have this like ridiculous thing of like, not that I care, it's just this like thing of, obviously, this need to keep yourself safe, obviously, but
Yeah, absolutely.
it is like very unfinished, and I feel like it is like that for a lot of people, because people haven't got the help that they need. A lot of
Yeah.
people have had to do the same thing as me. They've, even if it's not to the extent that I did, but move area or remove social media, if it's one or two or one or
Yeah.
two things or what. And I think a lot of people have that, where they just live in this constant thing of not really knowing, like, and like you said, like, not being able to close the chapter, finish the chapter.
Yeah.
It's just always going to like live there unfinished.
Because I still think I see him, even though it's not him. So when I'm driving, if a car follows me just for a little bit more time than maybe another car, that's it. It has to be him.
Yeah.
Even though it's not him, it has to. It's him. It's definitely him. Right? What am I going to do? And I do, like you said, I go through this thing in my head. Right, I've got to do this, 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 this.
Yeah.
We recently moved, so we were at risk of being homeless, and we had to take this house. And unfortunately, this house is near to where a lot of stuff happened. So I now have to figure out other ways to drive. But the other day, I had to go to the shop, and the shop is literally where an incident happened, which is next to a pub where something else happened, and it's near the road where his mum, I don't know if she still lives there, but that's where loads of things happened. Anyway, I literally had to go through so many different therapies in my head. Do this, do this, do this, do this. I did it all. And then as I was walking, I was literally almost talking to myself the whole time. I wasn't on my own, so that helped. But the whole time I was talking to myself like, I am safe. I am okay. This is not your lived experience anymore. Blah, blah, blah. And every school run, every time I get out into my car now, I have to do the same thing whilst I'm driving, because it's just triggers so badly.
People around me are like, I'm a bit snappy one morning because that's what's going on, and people don't understand why I get so stressed. Like, on days out, I'm so stressed getting everything ready, getting in the car, and because that's what's going on in my head. That's what's going around. Even though you explain it to someone, it's so invisible. Like, you can't see that that's what's going on in your head. Like, that you're mentally going through like this, this, and this. And the sad fact is, I would go through this, and a million times over, I've gone over this checklist in my head, and this safety checklist, whatever you want to call it. But the fact is, if I did see him, it would all go out the window, because your fear response would kick in. So almost you feel like you're just wasting your whole life away, because like spending a lot of time doing these ridiculous checklists, but it would all go out the window. If I saw him, I'd probably freeze up or whatever. Like, I don't know what my response would be in the moment, and everything would go out of your brain, because the fear that would invoke your body would just completely take over, and it would all be pointless. So, Alessia, thank you so much for joining me today on my podcast. And like we've said before, I'm hoping that we can record another one on some specific topics, because we seem to have a lot in common. So, yeah, it's been amazing talking to you today. And hopefully we'll be seeing more of you on here anyway another time.
And you on mine too. Can't wait for it.
Definitely, yes, definitely. Stalking is a really horrific and serious crime that affects 1 in 3 females. I'm on a mission to spread awareness and share stories. If you feel that you or someone you know is experiencing stalking, talk to a family member or professional about it. You can also visit Paladin, Alice Ruggles Trust, Susie Lampo Trust, and Action Against Stalking websites to access a load of information. If you feel you need to take further action, you can call the National Stalking Helpline or the police on 101. If you have any interest in telling your story or you simply want to give me feedback, you can contact me by email, talkingagainststalking@hotmail.com. If you've enjoyed my podcast episodes, follow Talking Against Stalking on Instagram and share the episodes to spread the awareness of stalking.